From battlefield to bomb shelter, from home front to hospital, from volunteer rosters to victims lists, women experience war in distinctive, gendered ways. These are their stories, these are their voices. Welcome to Voices of Women at Wartime, a podcast by the Center for Women's Justice in Israel. I'm Rivka Lubitch, and I'm co-hosting today with Hana Katzman. Hana works at the Center for Women's Justice. Rachel Stomel and I interviewed Hana on the first episode as mother of Chaim Shurun Katzman, may his memory be blessed, who was killed in the massacre on October 7th at his home in Kibbutz Cholit. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, please take time and go back to the first episode and listen. Hi, Hana. It's good to have you here today.
Hi, Rivka. I'm happy to be here. Today we're going to be interviewing Hana Cooper, a digital collections selector at the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem. A few weeks ago, I attended a retreat at a hotel in Cyprus for parents of fallen soldiers. On Saturday evening, Motzei Shabbat, a young couple performed a concert, and I noticed that the woman, the wife, had an American accent. So afterward, I went up to her and introduced myself, and we spoke for a few minutes, and she told me that her sister is named Hana, her twin sister. So I asked what her twin sister does. So she said that she works at the National Library as an archivist, and she recently won an award for her work documenting the events of October 7th. So I said, I work for the Center for Women's Justice, and we have a podcast, and we were hoping to find someone to tell us about the work at the National Library on this topic. So here we are today with Hana.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's just, this podcast is so wonderful in the way that it brings different voices of women together, especially at this time. It's so important.
Thank you. So first of all, can you please tell us exactly what is a digital collection selector? And also tell us how you began work at the library and what you were doing until October 7th.
Yes, of course. So this is a new title. I'm the first digital collection selector at the library. I started my work a year and a half ago. So I've been at the library for a short while before everything happened. Basically, I was brought in to work on the Internet Archive division at the library. It's a project that has been going on for a few years, but it always kind of exchanges hands between departments, and we were trying to streamline this process. And so I was brought in to kind of work on the policy aspect of international cooperations with other similar institutions that are archiving the internet. And yeah, just everything that has to do with digital materials that are born digital and that are kept digitally in our systems kind of come into sort of my jurisdiction in a way.
Do you look for material, or do you get material that people send you or that organizations send you? Like, what do you get up in the morning and you sit there and look around and see what's interesting to archive?
So it's a mix. I'll explain. The library has a three-pronged approach to collecting digital materials, specifically internet materials. The first is an annual crawl. So every year, we collect the entirety of the Israeli internet and the broader Jewish internet as far as we can reach. So that entails everything that is under the IL domain, everything that is written in Hebrew, and everything that its IP is located in Israel. Aside from that, we have just an enormous world that we need to collect in a way that is less automatic and more manual. We're trying to kind of find the sweet spot between the two, because we are talking about just an enormous amount of information that we need to collect. For the annual crawl, we also use the other selectors in the library, that select for Judaism in English, that select for Judaism in Latin languages, and so forth.
Wait, can you just explain what an annual crawl is? Because
yes, I'm sorry.
I see that it's spelled CRAWL.
Yeah. Basically, we try to capture an internet page as it is in the moment that we're collecting it. So all the script, all the way it works, the visual, the everything, the code that operates it, we capture it and snatch it and bring it into our archive, so that in 100 years, you'll be able to go onto your computer and access what exactly a certain internet page looked at a certain point in time. So basically, it's just about conserving the internet because the National Library of Israel, as you know, is in charge of the national memory of Israel and the Jewish people. And traditionally, we've been doing it through publications, so books and newspapers and magazines and journals and whatever we can get our hands on throughout the more than 100 years that the library has been around. But more and more, the content that defines the national culture and the national memory never gets to print, never gets to be published
Right.
in a physical form. So the internet has become more and more of just a crucial point to manage, to kind of try and get our collection to reflect what is out there.
So you said you're trying to collect all Jewish content, basically, from all around the world that appears on the internet, right?
Yeah.
All around the world or in Israel?
And the world. So the two main collections at the National Library, of course, are the Judaica collection and the Israel collection. And we want to collect as much as we possibly can for these two collections.
And it's only material that's in Hebrew? Is that what, am I understanding right?
No, okay, so I'll go back and I'll explain a bit more in depth, maybe. So this is the annual crawl. The annual crawl, we collect everything that we possibly can, all of it. We were talking about millions of websites, basically, millions of URLs that we are sending the robots to collect and bring into our collection.
Let me rephrase and see if I have it right. Everything in Hebrew or published in Israel. That's one selection.
Yes.
Then you have, I'm guessing, you take Jewish websites, Jewish news websites, any website that you can find that's dedicated to a Jewish or Israeli topic.
Yes.
But then you must have a lot of other material that isn't specifically on a Jewish website. So I gave the example when we spoke before of blogs.
Yes.
In the 80s and 90s, blogs were very popular. I had a blog that I wrote here in Israel about my life and about what's going on in Israel. How would you find something like that?
So we, in the past, have done it manually. Just the selectors, such as myself and other people in the library, just go once a year and try and collect manually as much as we possibly can. Nowadays, this last year, we tried a different approach of using keywords and collecting in a more broader way, and then later on sifting through the information that we received and taking the websites that were relevant. It kind of led to us having a bigger collection than ever before, but we also know that we didn't get to the margins. We didn't get to the more secluded parts of the internet, and we are still trying to make a dent in that huge, rich part of the internet. And we're always trying to find new ways because we know that we can't do it manually. We know that we have to do it in a more automatic way because this is the type of content that it requires a certain approach. But aside from the annual crawl, which is important and is a very big part of our work, we also do a frequent crawl. And that means that we collect websites that we can't wait till that point once a year that we have that website. It won't be of any merit if we only collected a specific type of website once a year. So I'm talking about, of course, about news websites and about mostly websites that are frequently visited and frequently updated. And we have a list of around 140 websites, both from Israel and from the broader Jewish world. So news websites that have to do with the major news website of South African, the South African Jewish community, for instance, or the French community, La Tribune Juive, or other websites of that type are harvested once a day by our robots. And those types of websites we collect manually. Aside from the annual and the frequent crawl, we also have a subject-based crawl. And that is when websites that usually don't get into the frequent crawl, and usually we would only collect them once a year, but there is a specific point in time. There is a specific event that requires us to collect these websites in real time. So when there's the COVID crisis, we collected a lot of the health organization websites. And when there was a judicial reform, we collected a lot of third sector websites, for instance, and political websites. And during October 7th, after the first few days, we started doing a subject-based crawl on the websites that had to do with the war. And that's kind of was my entry into this project.
Could you tell us where you were on October 7th and what happened after that?
So during October 7th, I was visiting my sister in Cyprus, and it became very clear to us that we had to get as soon as possible back to Israel. And when we came, I went back to my parents' house. I think most of the people can relate to that also. And I was meeting with my boss on Zoom, and he was telling me, okay, so like we usually do, you should make a list of all of the websites that have to do with the war. So we decided to do a collection that consisted of 3 types of websites. One of it was local websites that have to do with the kibbutzim, with the local jurisdiction of the areas in Otef Aza. The second one was government websites, so websites that have instructions to citizens on what to do, where to go, Pikuda Oref, and things like that. And the third one was websites that had to do with the war itself in some capacity. So documentation initiatives and support initiatives that have become more and more ubiquitous in Israeli society after the war. And that third part of the list, it was the smallest at the beginning, but it became by far the largest as the weeks went by. And afterwards, so when the library, I'm getting to the major point of it, the library, a few weeks after the war, has decided to create a national memory depository for all of the content having to do with the war. And our point of entry was in a lot of ways that subject-based crawl that I did at the first days of the war, because a lot of October 7th and a lot of the ensuing war, just its online presence was the major part of it. Like, I think for most of us, the way we experienced the war, if we were lucky, was through our screens. And that we had that kind of level of removal, but also it's just like in a lot of modern warfare, I think that war in Ukraine is a good example of that. The online sphere is
part
another,
of the war.
Is exactly, it's just another field of action, basically. And we saw at the beginning how crucial collecting it and preserving it in real time is. The content that we are collecting in the library is much larger than just the digital part of it. That was kind of the point of entry. But as we went forward, we started collecting everything, just videos and testimonials and interviews with victims and artworks and prayers and ceremonies and sermons and everything you can possibly imagine.
So from the little that I know about archiving, and everyone seems to be talking about collecting testimonies and archiving, we also spoke with Dr. Saraya Aroni on episode 13 about archiving, what she's doing in Beersheba. But I suppose that this one is the biggest, the main archive in Israel, the one that's done in the National Library. But I understand there are some ethical issues with collecting things and showing things that maybe the people wouldn't have wanted. Tell us about some of these problems that come up and how you solve them, if you solve them.
If we solve them, that's a good question. So I'll explain something shortly. The National Library of Israel, this project, the National Depository, it's called a Ma'agar HaZikaron HaLeumi in Hebrew, or Bearing Witness in English. Part of it is the collection that the library is doing. Most of it is just letting other archives know that we are interested in their materials and focusing them in one place for people to be able to access all the information in one place in an organized way. The library, even more than, I'm talking as a digital selector, but the library, more than it's focusing on collecting, it is also focusing an enormous amount of energy and kind of trying to create cooperation, just a really wide net of cooperation with documentation and support and every type of initiative around the war that has materials concerning the war. All of it, we want the archives in Beersheba, for instance, we're working in tandem with them. We're not interested in creating our own archive. What we want is to be able to give people a place that they know is a safe place for their materials, because these materials are so important. They're so precious to all of us. And what we don't want to happen is for people to collect materials, in the zest of the moment, because so many of these initiatives, we have more than 100 different initiatives that have sprung up since the war. Some of them are grassroots, some of them are more organized, some of them are even in government support. But the driving force of all of these initiatives are volunteers. Just you see this every day, people who have just put down everything else, taking up a camera, taking up whatever tool is in their disposal, and went out to take part, and collect, to help, to interview, to do whatever they can. And eventually, these volunteers, as is natural and as is healthy, will go back to their normal lives. What we don't want to happen is for these materials to just stay on someone's camera or in someone's hard drive or in someone's cloud on the computer, and to not see the light of day, because these stories are so crucially important to the national memory of Israel and the Jewish people.
Right, and they need to be in one place. Yeah. So tell us something about the ethical issues.
Yes, the ethical side of it. So in terms of law, the library is allowed to collect everything. We are allowed to keep in our depositories everything that we deem appropriate in our policies. In our collection policies. The government has given us that right for a few decades now. However, we are also intensely sensitive to the moral issues at play here. We are talking about materials that are so incredibly, it's difficult to gauge how sensitive they are. We're talking about so, for instance, one of the biggest parts of our collection are 200,000 videos that we got that were collected by a group called the Hana Cooper here in Israel.
Can you translate that? Hamal Ezrachi?
The Civil War Room. Yeah, I think that's a good translation. So one of the biggest donations to our collection has been 200,000 videos that we received from the Civil War Room. It's an organization that came to be in the first days of the war. Their goal was to locate the absentees, and they used these videos that were published online in the first few days of the war, and a lot of AI tools to recognize faces in order to locate people who have been abducted or missing in some ways. These videos have come into our possession now. They said we no longer have place for them. We want them to have them, or we're erasing everything. These videos are so, I personally, I just can't touch that part of our collection. I won't. And what we don't want to do here in the library is renew the trauma for people, is disrespect the memory of people whose memory has been disrespected enough.
Right, because what if people don't want their picture to be up there and they don't want them shown the minute that they were kidnapped or whatever? So
from the get-go, from the very start of this project, we are in very, very tight, the legal team here at the library is working very hard to make sure that we give the materials the legal treatment they deserve. At this point in time, we're not making anything available. When we do make things available, we will also be looking into exactly what we can and what we can't do. Nowadays, when you give content to the library, you have to state what the legal status of the materials that you're donating, whether it's an online thing that you've just happened across and you think should be in the library's possession, whether it's a creation that you yourself, that the rights of it are just your own, or whether it's materials that have been created by you and another person. This is the first time that the library is actively taking part in a national memory event. Usually we wait for the materials to arrive organically to the library's collection. So things that are for instance, from Yom Kippur War, we are still getting materials, we're still getting random notebooks and published materials even that the library just didn't think to collect.
When people die, often people find diaries.
Yeah, so these materials will kind of, trickle in gradually throughout the years through personal archives, through institution archives, maybe through gifts, through donations, in whatever way we get them. This is the first time the library has realized that we can't just stand aside and let things happen organically. Part of it has to do with the temporality of the materials, because so many of them are digital. As a person who collects the internet, I can tell you that there is this idea that the internet is forever. Parts of it are forever. Most of it are not forever at all.
It's interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
that's news.
Internet materials can disappear as quickly as they come into being. Yeah.
Especially social media, right? I mean, social media is not designed to be searched or held onto for a long time.
Good. I'm glad. I don't like social
I think
media.
all of us are glad.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like what should live on forever and what shouldn't. For us in the library, we're hoarders. We want to collect everything. We want to have everything.
Well, I hate it when people die and it looks like they're living on because there's some, they're still on whatever WhatsApp with you, or they still have a page on Facebook, and it's
after 4 months inactivity.
Oh, good,
I
great.
found it. Everyone from October 7th found out on February 7th.
That it disappears.
Before the final question, which is about submitting information, would you give us some examples of the diaspora, of the type of materials you mentioned, individual archives? So can you tell us what kind of material you're collecting about October 7th from abroad?
Yes, of course. So I've mentioned that this is an important collection, not just in the context of Israeli society, but of the broader Jewish society and diaspora. On our website, we have a place where people are invited to donate any type of materials that they think are relevant to our collection. So anything having to do with October 7th, with anti-Semitism, with the war, anything at all, we want it. Really, we want it, and we will, if you give us your permission, we will also make it available on our eventual archive. So if you have any type of materials that you think are relevant, we want them. We are collecting everything. Hana, you've mentioned social media accounts. We collect some of those. But we have a special TikTok collection, for instance, because that was one of the major parts, fields of action that we have seen since the beginning. We have a collection of prayers. We have a collection of statements, of letters, of personal diaries, like online and physical diaries of people that people have kept since the beginning of the war. A lot of collections that have to do with hasbara, diplomatic efforts in Israel and in the world. The campuses, the anti-Semitism on campuses.
Must be a lot of signs and events.
So the ephemera collection is also very big. So lots of posters, lots of flyers, all sorts of things that you can imagine. Basically, we are looking at the October 7th and the ensuing war as an ongoing event, and we are interested in the experiences that are felt not just here in Israel, not just by soldiers, not just by survivors. We are interested in the way that all of us have felt this event, and all of us have experienced it, and all of the content that has to do with this point in time. Because we know also at the library that, in real time, it feels like these materials maybe aren't that important. Maybe they're just too personal, but they really are a part of a national memory.
Can you please tell our listeners how they can submit material to your archive?
So you can go on our website. We'll provide a link, I think, to go with this episode. And you click on the button, you give us a bit of information about you so that we can get back to you in case we have any questions and queries, in case we need to make sure that we give the materials the right treatment. And yes, just anything and everything you can think of is relevant to our collection.
Thank you so much, Hana, for talking with us today. We learned so much, and we hope our listeners will follow the links in the podcast episode page to learn more about this important archive.
Thank you so much, Hana. for coming today. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in today. By listening to this podcast and giving women's voices your attention, you give them power. If you, like us, agree that women's perspectives are essential to the Israeli narrative, subscribe to the Voices of Women at Wartime wherever you get your podcasts, give us a rating, and encourage your friends to listen and subscribe too. If you have thoughts, questions, or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media on the Center for Women's Justice pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. In addition, we appreciate any amount via our donation button to help support our work.
Thank you, Rabbi Scott Kahn, for recording and editing. I'm Rivka Lubitch, and I was here with Hana Wacholder-Katzman. Be well and stay safe.